Welcome back, everyone. The Story of Jesus starring Orion and Sun, Part 4. We're going to close things out here, but as you can see, this is really a new beginning. We're going to start out with tracking the path of the sun at high noon on what we commonly call January 1st of 2020. Now remember, all of the screenshots that we're going to look at to tell the sky story are going to come from a free program you can find online called Stellarium. And this powerful tool helps us illustrate this enormous discovery for all of us to see. So we're going to now start tracking the sun for a while only. In this time of the year anyway, what we commonly call the Northern Hemisphere. Because as you can see, our old friend Orion is nowhere to be found under the area of the ecliptic line, right? And that's because during this time of the year, first of all, you can see that the arc of the ecliptic line relative to the Earth's horizon is a very short area, very flat and short relative to the Earth's horizon, and Orion is nowhere to be found. This is why during this time of the year, and what we commonly call the Northern Hemisphere, the tracking, how we're going to locate the calendar and how things are moving throughout the year, in this part of the world anyway, is going to be the sun, lining up with our familiar markers, the green line being the north-south meridian line, and the red line being the ecliptic line, remember. Now, on New Year's Day, as it's called, we commonly call it January 1st of 2020, in this case is what we're looking at, specifically the sky picture here. This is the day you'll notice, of course, we celebrate the first day of the new year, but when we're looking at where the sun is at its zenith on that day, notice that it's right at the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic. All right, so we're going to track now the path of the sun going forward month to month. So the following month, on what we commonly call February 1st of 2020 at high noon, we are locating the sun's position in the sky, and you'll find it once again on the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, but it has risen to a higher zenith point than we found it the month before. So notice that the arc of the ecliptic relative to the Earth's horizon has increased, right? There's more distance between it. And the sun being found on the ecliptic and the cross of the north-south meridian line still being at that mark point has moved higher in the sky than the month before when it reaches its zenith at high noon. So we'll continue watching the pattern, letting it unfold as we go forward again to the beginning of the next month, what we commonly call March 1st of 2020. Notice that at high noon, at the sun's zenith, it has climbed higher still in the sky than it was the previous 2 months, but you'll still find it at the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic. Notice again that the arc of the ecliptic relative to the Earth's horizon has moved up once again. Now, let's take a look at what happens when we go to the first of the next month, what is commonly called April 1st of 2020 at high noon. Something's changed. We notice that the sun has jumped off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic and is found to the east of that marker. It's moved from the constellation of Aquarius and also into the constellation of Pisces. So I want you to keep note of that. Also note that, especially because this discovery occurred on this day for me, I took a look at what was the myth behind what we know as commonly April Fool's Day. How did that tradition get started? Correlating it with the difference I saw of the sun jumping off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, I did a little digging and found something interesting I wanted to share with you that you can find on the History Channel's website. So this is a little blurb about April Fool's Day. And at the top there, it says it's shrouded in mystery. Of course it is. But we're going to unshroud that mystery. But we're going to start reading right underneath where it says April Fools, because they do give us a little information that we're going to tie in here that's important. So according to the History Channel, it reads, some historians speculate that April Fool's Day dates back to 1582, when France switched from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, as was called for by the Council of Trent in 1563. So notice that's almost a 20-year difference that this calendar switchover was called for until it was actually implemented. Now, the old calendar, back to what the History Channel says about it, that's the Julian calendar. In the Julian calendar, as in the Hindu calendar, the new year began with the spring equinox around April 1st. So a couple of things I want to point out before we go further. One is that the authors of the Gregorian calendar were under the Roman Catholic Church authority. In other words, the Pope. And the Pope at that time was Pope Gregory, hence the name Gregorian calendar. What is the Gregorian calendar? Well, it's the calendar that we're currently using. The designation, we know it by is AD, right? Well, AD, most people don't know, is short for Anno Domini, which translates to the year of our Lord. This is when the Roman Catholic Church decided to sync our current timeline that we all are currently still existing on, supposedly, to the life of Christ. So this is the Gregorian calendar timeline that we're still using today. Okay, keep that in mind. So let's go back to what the History Channel says in the second paragraph. They continue, people who were slow to get the news, and they're talking about this changeover from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. They failed to get the news or failed to recognize that the start of the new year with this changeover had moved to January 1st. And those who continued to celebrate the new year during the last week of March through April 1st became the butt of jokes and hoaxes and were called, quote-unquote, April Fools. These pranks included having paper fish, keep that in mind, placed on their backs and being referred to as, it's a French term, but I don't speak French, so I'll give you the English translation, April fish. Something fishy here. Said to symbolize a young, easily caught fish and a gullible person. Well, let's go back to what the sky is telling us on what we commonly call April 1st of 2020 at high noon, what we know as April Fool's Day. So back to what we're looking at, the sun has jumped off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic. A familiar friend is back, right? And we know that because this time of the year we find the constellation Orion rising again from the eastern horizon, right? But again, note that the sun on its journey has moved not only off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, it's moved from the constellation of Aquarius into Pisces. Now, when we look at the sky story, doesn't it make more sense, knowing that Pisces is the constellation of the two fishes, that it could be that those April fish or April Fools on April Fool's Day had those paper fish taped to their backs to tell them symbolically that the new year is no longer celebrated when the sun is in Pisces. Stupid. Or fool, right? Okay, so now you know where April Fools really comes from. Let's go to the following month, first day, what we commonly call May 1st of 2020 at high noon. Let's look at the pattern now. The sun jumping off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, you can find it's still off that marker point to the east, but it is continuing on its journey, the sun, to rise higher at its zenith. As you can see, the arc of the ecliptic line has increased, and the space between the Earth's horizon and the ecliptic line has increased. And our old friend Orion now is significantly higher above the horizon on what we commonly call May 1st, or this time of the year. And his bow is pointing directly, right, to the sun. Now, if we go to the first of the next month, that would be what we commonly call June 1st of 2020. We notice that at high noon, when the sun is at its zenith, it is higher still than it has been the previous 2 months before, off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic. So it's following that same pattern since what we commonly call April. Orion's path has continued to close the distance between Orion and the sun as it is climbing higher, right, in the sky. The arc of the ecliptic has increased in relative distance to the Earth's horizon. And as we move forward to now what is known as the summer solstice, at least in what we commonly call the northern hemisphere, this is right around the time of year where you're going to find that it's the longest day of the year and shortest night of the year, therefore. And it is the time of the year when the sun has reached the highest zenith, or its highest point of ascent, that it will all year long at high noon. But I want you to notice something else here. Yes, the arc of the ecliptic is also increased even wider relative to the Earth's horizon, but take a look at where Orion is in relative position to the sun. Orion's bow is just now again crossing the line of the north-south meridian line and the cross of the ecliptic. And if you follow his arm up to where it meets the sun on the ecliptic, it appears as if Orion is holding the sun in his hand, doesn't it? And that dark spot right next to the sun on the ecliptic is a new moon as well. So we're going to take it through then to the beginning of the next month, what we commonly call July 1st of 2020. And note that the sun has reached its highest zenith, right, all year, just a few weeks before. And so it's in relatively the same position as the previous image. But now Orion has moved completely to the middle of the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, but no longer appears as if he's holding the sun in his hand, right? So let's go just to a couple days later, what is commonly called July 4th of 2020 at high noon. And this is a common date, at least if you live in so-called America. Most celebrate what is called Independence Day on that day. You're about to find out why it's really called Independence Day, and it doesn't have much to do with the history book story that you've been given. So when we're looking at the sky story on what we commonly call the 4th of July, we're taking a look at where Orion's position is. You can see that he is still continuing to move westward day by day, crossing over the north-south meridian and ecliptic cross. He's no longer appearing to hold the sun in his hand as he is traveling westward. But the sun, as you notice, is staying in the same relative position to the east side of the north-south meridian line, not moving so much. But you're going to find out as you go forward that it's from this point when Orion is going to pass over the cross of the north-south meridian and ecliptic point, where he continues westward and the sun stays east of that line. Their journeys are now going to continue independently. This is the real reason why Independence Day is celebrated as a holy day or holiday, at least here in what we commonly call America. Going forward to the next month, the first day of what we commonly call August of 2020, at high noon, note that the pattern is holding. The sun's location is found to be still coming back down, right, from its highest zenith point all year at the summer solstice. Now the zenith point isn't as high here at what we commonly call August 1st of 2020. The ecliptic arc relative to the Earth's horizon That gap is narrowing once again, and the sun is still found to the east side of this marker of the north-south meridian and ecliptic cross. Now we're going to continue on to the following month, what we commonly call September 1st of 2020. When the sun is at its zenith at high noon, you can notice the pattern still holding true that what we've been looking at the last couple of months here. The sun is now rising lower when it reaches its zenith as compared to the Earth's horizon, but still to the east of the north-south meridian and the ecliptic. And our old friend Orion is found now lower in the western horizon as he's continuing his westward descent. Going ahead to the following month, now we're getting to the end of the year, what is commonly known as October 1st of 2020. Notice as we're still tracking the sun, its position when it reaches its zenith on this day is lower still than it has been in the previous months, but the pattern holding true, still to the east side of the north-south meridian line and the cross of the ecliptic. And Orion is found significantly descended into the western horizon to Earth. Now we're going to jump ahead, not to the beginning of the following month, but on Halloween as we celebrate it, what is commonly called October 31st of 2020. When the sun is at its zenith, the pattern is still holding. It is still to the east side of the north-south meridian and ecliptic cross. But as you can see, over in the west, there's no visible stars left of the constellation of Orion. In other words, Orion has descended into the dark hollows, if you will. Now, the pattern is still holding when we look at the arc of the ecliptic flattening out and it being a shorter distance to the Earth's horizon once again, right? But if we go ahead just one more day, so to the beginning of what we commonly call November, so November 1st of 2020, look what happens. At high noon, when the sun is at its zenith, you'll find that the sun has jumped back from the east side of the north-south meridian line in the ecliptic cross and is now on the west of it. This is known as All Saints' Day in the Roman Catholic Church. And by looking at the sky story, we can see that the sun jumping back over to the west side of the cross on what we commonly call November 1st of 2020. It's doing exactly the opposite dance it did. If you remember, you can go back if you don't, that we found it doing on what is commonly called April 1st of 2020, or April Fool's Day, exactly 6 months apart, or its opposite. So going ahead to the first of the next month, what we commonly call December 1st of 2020 at high noon, notice that the sun is moving back already toward the cross of the north-south meridian and the ecliptic line. And the pattern we've been watching is holding true once again. The sun is at its zenith lower on the horizon, and the arc of the ecliptic relative to the Earth's horizon is flattening out once again and becoming itself lower to the Earth's horizon as well. So we're going to go forward to what is commonly called the winter solstice, at least here in what we commonly call the northern hemisphere, remember. All of these are opposite if you're living in the southern hemisphere. But all of this story you can see fits because that's where we're looking at this from different perspectives. High noon to midnight, sunset, this will all tie together here. All right, so what we commonly call the winter solstice in what we call the northern hemisphere commonly occurs usually somewhere around what we commonly call December 21st, in this case of 2020. So notice that Orion isn't anywhere to be found under the ecliptic. It's descended below the Earth's horizon. But keep in mind that if you're in the southern hemisphere and it's at midnight, that's where Orion is going to be visible in the sky for you. Okay, So we are back to tracking solely the sun's journey, found to be at the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, right at the winter solstice. Now, this is the shortest day or the longest night of the year for those of us living in the northern hemisphere, right? And look at how flattened out the arc of the ecliptic is as well. So we're going to go forward day by day through the 3-day period of the winter solstice to what we commonly call Christmas. So notice that there's not much movement day to day from what we commonly call the winter solstice through to Christmas. The ecliptic arc is still pretty flattened out relative to the Earth's horizon, and the sun, though you may notice, isn't moving higher when it's reaching its zenith in the sky at noon each day. In other words, it's died on the cross for 3 days. Now, on what we commonly call December 25th of 2020, this is what is commonly celebrated as Christmas Day, at least by practicing Christians. This is the day that the sun starts to begin its upward descent, meaning its ascent to a higher zenith each day throughout the year. We're going to go ahead to New Year's Day. That'll take us right where we started from, the top of the next year. So what is commonly called January 1st of 2021, at high noon, we see the sun at its zenith is at the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic has started to have a bigger arc, right? There's a bigger space in between the Earth's horizon and the ecliptic line, and you can see that the sun is going to start reaching a higher zenith as the pattern repeats itself. We'll go forward one more month to what is commonly called February 1st of 2021 as the pattern repeats itself again. What we're going to do now as we end things off is look at the tail end of the story that we were just looking at, but we're going to flip it to a 12-hour different perspective. So we're going to look at the winter solstice, that time of year, in what is commonly called the northern hemisphere. And so this is, again, the shortest day of the year for that part of the world, or longest night. And instead of looking at noon, at what's going on in the sky, we're looking at its exact polar opposite, midnight. I want you to see right away, pretty noticeable, right? Right smack in the middle of the image, you'll find our friend Orion, who is lined up, looks like he's hanging with his arm, right? Right on the cross of the north-south meridian line and the cross of the ecliptic. Now, we're going to follow Orion's journey in this story here once again as we get into the story of Christmas. But we're also going to track a star that we haven't yet, and that is Sirius, otherwise known as the dog star, so named because it is that very bright star, very noticeable in the constellation called Canis Major, or the Great Dog. So watch what happens over the period of winter solstice leading up to Christmas, as we did at high noon just before. So on the 21st of what we commonly call December of 2020, notice Orion, his arm is still hanging on the cross, and Sirius is moving closer to it. So over this 3-day period, you can see that for 3 days, Orion is hanging on the cross. We're to what is commonly called December 23rd of 2020 at midnight. And you can see that the last stars of Orion's arm are hanging on the cross of the north-south meridian and the ecliptic line. Sirius has moved closer to the cross. But we're going to track for the first time a new player who's entered onto the scene. On the eastern horizon, the very first few stars of the constellation known as Virgo start to appear above the eastern horizon at midnight. And on Christmas Eve, you can see the following day, what we commonly call December 24th of 2020 at midnight, Orion now is off the cross of the north-south meridian and ecliptic line. Sirius is inched closer to it. And this is why the story of Jesus involves being born of a virgin, when you can see once again that the constellation of Virgo is appearing to rise for the first time this time of year above the Earth's horizon in the east. And on Christmas Day, the story is complete. Orion has moved off the cross of the ecliptic, following his bow to where his arrow is pointing. He is the fisher of men, no matter what time of year you're looking at him. At these very important marking points of seasons, his bow is aimed right at Pisces, the two fishes. Sirius has inched closer to the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic, and Virgo the Virgin is appearing above the eastern horizon on Christmas Day. We're going to jump ahead to New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, commonly called December 31st of 2020 this year, at midnight, notice that our friend Orion is continuing on his westward journey past the cross of the north-south meridian and the ecliptic line completely. But what has lined up with it exactly is the star that we've been tracking, Sirius. If you follow that star, go up the north-south meridian line to where the ecliptic crosses it, you will find a constellation called Gemini, known as the twins. Now, if we take this forward one more day to where we started out with, right? What is commonly called January 1st of this time, 2021, at midnight, the story becomes complete. Sirius, the star, is lined up exactly on the north-south meridian line in the cross of the ecliptic, and right at that cross, right above it, is the constellation of Gemini, which is interesting to note here as we tie things in, that the month of January, that we currently know it as, was so named supposedly because of the Roman god Janus. The Roman god Janus being the two-faced god, one facing the past and one face facing the future. Looking at the story that the sky is telling on what we commonly celebrate as New Year's Day at midnight, you can see how this Roman god Janus and the month of January being the beginning of the year actually comes from something much older, and the real god of the ecliptic in the sky that day, Gemini. This is the oracle, the all-seeing eye, the masterpiece that so many masterpieces have been made. This is the template. This is the master key. And if you have it, you can unlock many, many stories and hidden meanings. This is the only part of the celestial sphere that travels all over the world. It sees all of us, and all of us can see it, all at the same time, whether it be day or night. This is the real clock or calendar, both in the sky, that the real Creator has blessed us all with, and with the amazing God-given senses to be able to see it and decode its real meaning, to know it. This is the secret decoder ring of the biggest myths turned into the biggest world religions, the biggest occulted secret knowledge that has been held over the heads of us, quote-unquote, common people by occulted men. This is everything from ancient myths and stories to modern-day Lord of the Rings and the Truman Show. and so many other stories and myths in our modern age as well. These same stories have been told for maybe thousands of years in different versions, dressed up as different characters for different cultures and given different names over time, all syncretized. But the time is now for clearer vision. What we commonly call 2020 on our current supposed Anno Domini timeline. That is some amazing synchronicity, isn't it? Even more so when I tell you this. This personal discovery I made, as I mentioned in the beginning, was on what we commonly call April 1st of 2020, something commonly called April Fool's Day. How ironic it was that that was the day the Creator chose to open my eyes even wider to see this enormous truth with crystal clarity and make me so much wiser. And then to share it with, first, the man I share my life with, the man I love, the man I call my king, so we could both see and be made wiser together. And now, and I don't know how many thousands of years that this knowledge has been occulted and this wisdom kept hidden from all of us, quote unquote, common men and women's views. Now the Creator here is wise enough to show us, because it was already known that we'd share it with you. This is the real timepiece in the sky that the real Creator placed there. And over time, man who had this wisdom occulted it. And in this reality, held it over all of our heads with deep deception. It's now become a modern-day alarm clock. That's what the Creator turned this into. And it's time for the whole world to wake up and be free of these dark stories and deceptions made up for you to believe are something else entirely. This isn't about a pandemic, end-of-the-world, apocalyptic revelation that's been preached to you about from your holy books. The revelation is the revealing, the real revealing of what has been hidden from you, but was there the whole time. This is the world's timepiece, the calendar of holy days or holidays we all celebrate on the timeline known as the Year of Our Lord, the Anno Domini calendar, the timeline tied to, in this case, the Jesus story for at least the last 2020 years. This real timepiece floats on the celestial sea. But who has laid claim to the Creator's timepiece and the story they made up about it? I see clearly now what is meant by the term Holy Sea. I can clearly see the celestial sea, the Holy Sea is laid claim to, and I see the sail they really sail upon. Do you see? This is truly a worldwide revelation right now, with all this viral panic infecting almost everyone's mind. It's commonly known as April of 2020. And I solved this amazing secret that's been kept hidden with the aid of the biggest decoder ring in the sky that I could have imagined the Creator would be blessing me with to show me, so that I could receive this incredible revelation and share it with whoever cares to see it too. This is freedom. Can you hear it ringing? This is not the end of the world, but the end of this story that's been held over our heads and kept hidden. The real Creator's alarm clock has just gone off. The wake-up call for all of us, all around the world. How will you respond? My response is this: to stand in the power of the real Creator's truth and love. I know an alarm clock when I hear one. I am fully awakened, and this is my response.